So that's basically it.
I just wanted to jump in real quick on one thing before BOE discussion. That was at my meeting on Friday, and this was clearly after the minutes were written and after we had the policy committee meeting. But we had a meeting on Friday. We meet once a month with the county superintendent, and this issue of whether or not we could go ahead and make plans with respect to making up days of school after graduation received the green light. So we can go ahead and make those plans. He clarified some information for us and assured us that if we would like to consider having a snow day makeup plan that involved having days of school after graduation, that was allowed. The only caveat that he expressed was that you have to make sure you have your 180th day in session before you hand out any diplomas to seniors. So we're good to go ahead and make those kinds of plans if we can work out some of the other things that you mentioned.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
I had a question on the time to keep the tests, and are the students allowed to see how long do the students have to look at the tests? So I'm curious on what the discussion was. I don't need the exact numbers, but I'd like to know what the direction was taken.
So what we were looking at is board policy on what type of language is already in our board policy to address the issue of the amount of time that teachers have to hold items if they're not returning them to students. Obviously, in the large majority of cases, our students are getting tests back to keep. The question becomes, if they're not getting the test or the graded assessment back to keep, and the teacher is holding it because they want to protect the integrity of the test, if they're going to reuse a quarterly exam, or they have designs that they want to save something potentially to use again in the future, at what point in time would you give that test back? Would you have to give that test back to the students? What if it's a portfolio item that they've kept, and at some point in the future they want to give it back to the students? So we've been going through policy a little bit, looking for where we have language like that. And the question became, well, is there anything practical? Is there any practical language for the faculty to address this issue if you've got a collection of assessment items that you want to give back to the student? Maybe it's at the end of the year, you've been holding them, and now you want to give them back to the student. What's the process for doing that? How long should you wait before you get rid of piles of old papers that students may have? And what process do you need to go through to do that? So we've been looking at policy. We have some language in some of our policies, and we were looking at the assessment policy because we thought it might be a good place to add some language. And some of the discussion that we had was to wait until, for example, the fall of the school year that just ended before disposing of old assessments, before disposing of portfolio artifacts that you no longer need because the school year's over. There's been no question about the assessment or the assignment. At what point is it safe to purge your files, if you will, and start fresh? So I made the suggestion that we look at it within that student assessment policy, seeing if it makes sense to put some language in there that speaks to that issue for the fall of the start of the next school year.
One of the concerns I have is that the students are not able to see the test. So they're told that they missed 6 problems or 6 questions. I think the student has the right to see the test results. I don't think they have the right to hold on to them, but
No, there's no problem with letting kids see tests or going over tests with kids. And in most cases, kids are getting tests back. In some cases, a teacher might want to hold a test, but there's no reason that a student couldn't meet with the teacher, review the test, go over the test. That's not a problem.
okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. We're up to the curriculum committee.
Curriculum committee had a special meeting last week and is going to meet on Friday, so I'll report out at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Advocacy?
Advocacy met this morning,
and I will put together the minutes and get them out to you guys or report out at the next meeting.
SEL?
SEL has been postponed, and at the latest, won't be meeting June 21st, perhaps before that.
We're up to liaison committee reports. Does anyone have anything? Okay. Now we're up to public comment on non-agenda items. If anyone comes up, please, you can sign in after you come up to the mic if you want, but tell us your name and address, please.
James Vogel, 20 Evergreen Place. Just want to talk a little bit about some of the accolades that were received this evening and some of the retirements, because those are the positives that we have in our district. Unfortunately, we do have some negatives that I think need to be addressed, and I'd like to do that through the climate survey that was given earlier in the year, and I did have a chance to do some analysis of the climate survey, and I have a handout for you that I'll give to you at the end of my comments. I'm very concerned with the lack of participation in the staff with respect to both the New Jersey Department of Education survey and the Berners Township Board of Education survey. Less than 50% of the staff completed the survey, which to me is quite alarming. What that says to me is that we do have a bit of some dissension possibly within the ranks, and a climate that is not really, that has a really good feeling to it if you can't get more than 50% of your staff to answer a survey about how things are going. That's just my opinion. If you take a look at some things that really stand out, Oak Street School, only 42 students participated in the New Jersey Department of Education survey, which means that that's basically just 2 classes that took the survey, and yet we had glowing reports that were reported by the principals and by Mr. Markarian about how well we're doing in terms of our climate. Also alarming is the fact that I just feel that staff morale is pretty low, and you're going into a negotiating year starting July 1. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that, and I spoke to the board a year and a half ago regarding the instructional aides and support staff, their salaries were frozen and cut. And I mentioned that it was, in my opinion, that we had a lot, and I gave you specific numbers on the number of instructional support staff leaving the district. I think it was 36, that was during one cycle. And I was assured by Mr. Syed that it was because they were moving on to bigger and better things, that they were going to go pursue maybe their education degree. I also want to submit that they were also looking for a better paying job. In terms of the climate overall, I don't think that the teachers feel as though they can do their job effectively. And the reason I say that is because I work with a few teachers who used to work for Berners Township Public Schools, and knowing that I was going to speak to you tonight on this topic, I asked one of them who works in my building, and some of the things that she said, it was quite alarming. And I know that we have sour grapes, and I know that people are disillusioned and they have their opinions about where they work, but we have that in all workplaces. But she said that the climate was stifling, that there were too many mandates to follow, not enough autonomy in the classroom, and little or no support from the administration. So I just want to throw this out there to you because I think it needs to be addressed. If you have, and I've noticed the amount of staff who are resigning and leaving. Why? When you have good people, good quality teachers leaving the district to do what? Go somewhere else. Why? And it's not because I think it's a failed evaluation. I just think they're unhappy, and we need to figure out why that is. So that goes now to the mental wellness of our teachers. What can we do to improve the mental wellness of our teachers and to keep them here in Bernards Township? Because we have great staff, and when great staff decide to leave, it doesn't make us so great. Yes, we can have people who come into the district and who can, perform and do really highly qualified things, but you're taking all of that experience and it's leaving. You're replacing it with somebody who's inexperienced or who has much less experience than those who have left. Okay, thank you. So it's just something I want to point out to you and throw it out there because it is alarming. I have been looking at the board minutes and I have been seeing the number of people who have resigned. And regardless of their reasons, it is troublesome that we can't keep our quality teachers because they feel they need to go somewhere else. Thank you. I'll start on the other side of the table.
Hi, my name is Debbie Murray Breslow, 38 Watchung Drive, Basking Ridge. I spoke at the last meeting, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over it again, but the points that I raised were not addressed by the board. I received a subsequent email follow-up by Nick Markarian, who said that typically if it's student-specific, he'll not use the board meeting to do that. My comments were not student-specific. I spoke about the curriculum, honors chemistry curriculum, and the fact that there seems to be confusion or inconsistency on whether that curriculum is aligned with the subject matter SAT test. I talked about the unprecedented stress, harmful stress that the students in this course have been subjected to, and I also had a plea for test corrections. So that's on the table. So some of the other things I just wanted to mention. Curriculum. I'm not quite sure how it works, but at the last meeting, the curriculum chairperson, to me, appeared to be reading Tom Misiak's letter on what the chemistry curriculum is all about. I've got 3 letters from Tom Misiak for separate questions that I had sent to him, and they are always with the comment that the Chemistry 1 honors program for sophomores is aligned with the subject matter SAT test. It's not true. I've had an older child go through the system, and he didn't have that curriculum. You can take a subject matter SAT test. You don't have to know every single topic on the test, and you can still do really, really well. For students that want to take the subject matter SAT test in chemistry, that's fine. There's other resources available to them as well. The students in this year were blindsided. They didn't know that the curriculum had changed. Parents started complaining, I would say at least by mid-year, and they were told the curriculum changed. I started coming in very, very early of March, and I believed it. I said, oh, I guess it changed. We didn't know. I said, how do we fix it? Let's work together. These kids were suffering, and no one's listening, and I think that's a problem. So my questions, and I'm happy to sit on a committee. I'm happy to speak with all the members that are responsible for these types of decisions. I need to know how, when, and where the curriculum is going for honors chemistry. I have a child that went through the college process. No schools are looking at the subject matter SAT test. The board president had similar experiences with her children. So is it important to have an honors chemistry class in 10th grade be so perfectly aligned with the subject matter SAT chemistry test? By the way, these 10th graders are now studying organic chemistry, which our AP Chem students are not doing. So I need to know, are you guys going to talk? And I'd like to join that conversation. I don't want the same thing to happen to the next grade. I also am interested in seeing the letter that Tom Misiak sent over to the curriculum committee for the incoming 10th graders who were planning to take honors chemistry. Yeah, test corrections. I'm not sure why that wasn't implemented for these students. This is not just because chemistry is a hard class. The student survey that we did last year, we talked a lot about using tutors. It seemed that the district was interested in knowing whether our students were learning in the class or whether they were learning through outside tutors. There was no summer assignment for this honors chemistry class. Certainly the message to the parents and the students going into honors chemistry was that it was not going to be a very rigorous class. And it was. I want to touch upon the policy decision that was made or being talked about the student assessments. The student assessment seems to be arising from the chemistry quarterly test that was destroyed. I need to know if you guys feel that this is a student record, because if it's a student record, it's under New Jersey law and it's under federal law. So most tests are handed back. My daughter has 10, 20 tests that were handed back in chemistry. This one test was not handed back. So I need you to distinguish between standardized tests. I need you to distinguish between standardized tests like PARCC, the ones that you're retaining, and tests that the school won't return to the students. You have mandated student records and you have permitted student records. Mr. Byrne, the students did not see their tests. They were never allowed to see their tests.
Wow, that's terrible.
So you can't destroy a test or a student record. You can't alter it after it's been requested to be reviewed. That's under federal law, federal regulation. So keep that in mind as you review your policy and your regulations. The last thing I want to talk about, there was a committee chair who spoke last time on grade scheming and feedback from recent graduates, and perhaps recent graduates going off to college not being prepared. I need more information. How is this information being compiled? What sampling poll are you using? What year? Is it Ridge students? Is it national? Is it a New Jersey state poll that's come out that you're just referencing? I have a recent graduate, and I haven't got any information, either him directly or myself, about what his experience is in college. Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public comment?
Hello, my name is Nessa Rossi, 14 Culberson Road, Basking Ridge, New Jersey. First, I want to thank each of you for listening to our concerns as it relates to school safety. I know the last several months have been very challenging with very difficult discussions. I'm glad to hear that we're able to come together and make our schools as safe and secure as they possibly can be. I was hoping to just gain some clarification and make sure that I understand correctly when the Personnel Committee report was discussed. It was stated that the school security officer position at Ridge High School is being abolished and a position will be created with redefined roles and responsibilities. Is this position with the Director of Security or an SLEO Class 3? I believe it was also said that SLEO Class 3 candidates will be looked at for the front entrance of Ridge High School as well as other security needs. Are SLEO Class 3 officers being considered for William Annan and the 4 elementary schools, or just one at Ridge High School? And will the Director of Security and SLEO be in place for this September? Again, thank you for listening to our concerns and doing what's best for our children and staff.
Hello, Elaine Daddario, 46 Dykeman Place. I am asking the same question for clarification. I'm not sure when you talked about security and abolishing a position, if that meant Max's position at the front, because you talked about front and letting people in. If that meant the director, I know Tompkins handles that, replacing that part of his job description with an actual full-time person, or if that meant like the officers, like the SROs that are here, forgetting his name right now, but Neiman, who's here, and the like. Or if that's in addition to those people, Max, Tompkins, and Neiman, in a new position. If you could clarify that, that'd really help. Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public comment? Okay, at this point, I will close public comment. Okay. Mr. Syed's going to answer the first question, I guess?
Yeah, the staffing question by Mr. Vopel. So I did report out a couple of years ago, actually over the summer, when there was a discussion about AIDS, and some concern was expressed about being able to attract and retain our aid workforce. And what I said at the time was that I didn't anticipate any concern in attracting our aid workforce, and based on the competitive salary that we still offer, which is competitive, we have not had a gap this year in staffing for our aid workforce. I can report that Allison Reed and Special Services do a tremendous job in finding and attracting aides. Our turnover this year, I can't report out on it because the year hasn't concluded, but it's not tracking abnormally this year. We do see, as Mr. Vopel reported, we do see retention rates which can track, we see departures which can track in the teens all the way up into the 30s. We've had years where we have seen numbers in the 30s. This year, it looks like we're tracking high teens in terms of the number of aides that have departed, but I can report out to the board post June 30 on the exact number of aides that departed. The bigger question is on the certificated staff. I know something was raised about resignations of staff. I just did a quick look back from 1999. I couldn't get all the way up to 2018, but so April is the big month for resignations when you typically see staff moving in a school district, because you have notification deadlines required by law if you're not retaining staff. So there's a lot that goes into a resignation that the public is not aware of, because there are staffing decisions that are made that the public is not aware of. And also, I don't track why staff leave, so I can't report confidently the reasons. I know some of the reasons are that they do leave to obtain higher salaries, but oftentimes there are reasons that are personal to that staff member as to why they resign. I don't ask them that reason. There are times where we do exit interviews, but it isn't our practice to do that with every employee. But this year, in our resignation cycle for the month of April, we saw 11 resignations. That tracks a little bit less than average, so going all the way back to 2001, that was our high mark at 17 resignations in the month of April. And we were averaging from 2001, we saw 10 in 2002, 14 in 03, 9 in 04, 13 in 05. We track that average range over the last 16 years. I missed a couple of years there. I will get that information to the board, though, where I look at our full resignation cycle for all of the months, April, May, June. That's when you see the most number of resignations. We see very few resignations in the fall and the winter, but I will be sure to include that, too, when I provide the report. I'll be happy to do that. But there's nothing abnormal as far as I'm concerned from a personnel perspective, but I keep a close eye, and it's very important to us not just to retain our staff, but also we put a lot, and I know the supervisors, the directors put a lot into attracting staff, and I think the team does a tremendous job with that. We go to all the job fairs in the state. We do a really good job. The team does a really good job in seeking counsel from colleges in terms of what they're looking for to try to market ourselves to them. And I know we have some really good connections with some of the best schools in the state. I'm looking at Michael Fackelman, who has a connection with the College of New Jersey, which has reaped a lot of rewards for us. So I'm really pleased where we are, although this is certainly prime time for us in terms of our staffing needs now. We are in the midst of hiring, and I will be able to provide a report out to the board again on our resignation numbers, looking back the 17 years that I can look on the board website, which is a tremendous resource, by the way, for the public. Any member of the public can do that going back to 2001.
Thank you, Mr. Syed. Let's see, with respect to some of our other questions that we've heard this evening, I did meet last week with Mrs. Breslow, and as she accurately reported, I was concerned about getting into conversations about individual students that didn't address some of these questions publicly, and I do think that in our time together, I went through quite a bit of the answers to all the questions that she asked again this evening. However, one of the things that we did talk about was, where is the course going? And one of the things that came up in that conversation is adjusting the curriculum in the 18-19 school year to align with the plan that we would no longer make the SAT subject test an aspect of trying to prepare the students through the course, and that what we intended to do was encourage the students that were interested in taking that test to do so after taking AP Chem as a junior. Additionally, we talked about the fact that over the summer, in order to make that happen, the teachers were going to have to be working on doing some realignment of topics and pacing throughout the chemistry program to figure out exactly what's going to happen relative to not only the honors classes, but how those topics that are taken out of honors with respect to the SAT test are captured elsewhere. If they are, where are they? And how are we going to make the honors chemistry curriculum an honors class, and which topics most appropriately should be included, and how would the course be a little different than some of the other levels of chemistry in order to make it an honors class. So that's going to be a process that happens over the summer. And the other thing we talked about was the fact that the course is going to be different, and one of the things we discussed was the summer assignment, and would the existing or previously used summer assignment still apply. So if you're changing the course in some way for 18-19, and you have a summer assignment that wasn't used this past summer, but maybe was used the summer before, is that still a valid assignment to give the students? So I've spoken to both Dr. Heineman and Mr. Miziak to try to anticipate the answer to that question and think about that in terms of an assignment for current freshmen going into honors chemistry, to make sure that that summer assignment seems applicable with what goals they have in mind for adjusting the course, and to follow up in communicating with those freshman students so that they have an expectation regarding not only the summer assignment, but what the course may be adjusted to in the fall. With respect to policy, we are working on that, and we certainly have had a good bit of conversation. Sometimes when we get into certain aspects of policy that have a lot of citations with respect to administrative code and statute, we review those sometimes with both board counsel as well as our policy writing attorney firm, which is Strauss Esme. So we'll be doing that as we try to select the proper language and make sure we're doing the right things with regard to some of these student papers. Finally, a couple folks asked me to clarify what was intended in the Personnel Committee and the report out here this evening. So let me try to say it again in a different way. There is one position that I would recommend that we see if we can get staffed with SLEOs. It's one position. It may need to have more than one person covering the one position, and that one position is managing the visitor processing and entrance here at Ridge High School. That is using the funding for the current position that exists and applying it in a different way with a new job description. So it's swapping out the existing position for the same position with some modified job description. So it's still one position. When I was talking about the ability to use SLEOs for other things, one of the things that I want to work with the police department about is this possibility of trying to have officers available for other events. Most folks have seen officers at football games or other sporting events, and what I'm interested in is when we have some other major event with lots of folks at a school, could we have a pool of other officers in the form of SLEO 3s that we might be able to draw on rather than strictly the full-time officers? That was hopefully that explains that SLEO position. With respect to other staff that are here, two were mentioned. One was Mr. Thompson, how he fits in. The other was our SROs. And would the newly proposed Director of Safety and Security be a different position, separate and apart from those positions? So I absolutely love the program that we have with our SROs. I love working with the police department and our SROs. I would not suggest that we change anything with our SROs. I want both of them to continue in the capacity that they're already here, one at William Annan and one here at Ridge High School. So I have no reason to suggest or believe there should be any change with respect to those two SROs. With respect to Mr. Thompson, to try to be clear, Mr. Thompson is an assistant principal here at Ridge High School. He has all of the duties that a typical assistant principal has. And in addition to that, he is the leader of the district crisis team. Consequently, when the state indicated that we had to name someone as a safety and security officer for the district, he was the obvious and logical choice because he'd been intimately involved as the leader of the district crisis team. That being said, the plate runneth over, so to speak, with respect to Mr. Thompson and what he can accomplish in that role and what's realistic to expect of him. So that is why I proposed a separate new position, separate and apart from the SROs, separate and apart from Mr. Thompson, separate and apart from someone stationed at the entrance of Ridge High School, a district position that would be covering the district in a role of safety and security and directing and managing those issues. So that would be a new position. The others are not.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. I just had a couple comments. It's interesting that the Culture and Climate Survey results were brought up because I had actually pulled up the survey myself because some people were asking me about how students felt in the schools and whether they felt safe. And I had asked Mr. Markarian when we were talking what questions are in the student stressor survey about that, because there is a question in there about it. Obviously the data from this was last year and things may be a little bit different this year with the heightened awareness among the students. The last year when we did give the survey, the students' scores for feeling safe were quite high relative to what's typical in this survey and relative to some of the other categories in the survey. So hopefully that hasn't changed too much this year. But we are asking the 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders that question in the student stressor survey. So I guess we'll get some data there this spring to look at. So looking at these numbers, I just do have one question about when it says the percent of students at the elementary schools, what students, what grade levels, I can't remember right off the top of my head, what grade levels were surveyed. Was it all the way down? Or it was the older, was it like, it wasn't the youngest grades.
I believe we only did the 4th and 5th graders.
Or 3rd, 4th, and 5th? So when it says percentage of students, that's out of the whole school, right?
Well, I mean, look, I just got this, so
Yeah.
I have to go back and double check the numbers, but
Right,
you know, I can try to figure out.
right. I mean, I can go back and look at it too, I was just curious.
Yeah, I can go back and look at the participation.
And just in terms of the comments about teachers and how they feel, we've had a lot of discussion in the SEL committee we're talking about social and emotional learning for students, but we're also concerned about staff, and obviously they are interrelated. So we have been having a lot of conversations about that. It's something that concerns me a lot. I teach Introduction to Education students at Rutgers who are deciding whether to be teachers, and we go visit schools as a field placement component of the class. And a number of my students have come back to class afterwards upset because they went into classrooms and teachers were trying to tell them, don't be a teacher, or things are so bad in New Jersey right now, and it can be upsetting and depressing. I mean, they're not all having that experience across the board, but when they do come back with comments like that, you know, it's disturbing. It's been a rough bunch of years in education, nationally, obviously, not just in New Jersey. So it's definitely a concern that we all have, and We're obviously talking about it in the SEL committee and inviting teachers to come to that committee to hear from them. We're really hoping to get a huge staff turnout in the strategic plan because we want to hear how the teachers feel and what they think could help and what they think could be changed or be different in the district. So we're hoping to get a lot of participation. It's an opportunity for us to hear directly and talk with the teachers because sometimes that's hard. It's hard for board members, to do that sometimes. And it's a big district, there's a lot of teachers, and we have a lot of buildings. So we're hoping that people participate in that, and that's another avenue for us to get that. And I think that was the only 2 comments I had. Did anyone else have anything?
I'd just like to make a clarification because something that I reported out on last time was referenced, specifically in the ad hoc SEL committee's minutes from the April 30th meeting. I'm just going to read it as it was reported out. I'm sure it's in the video from last meeting. This was in the topic of weighted grading at Ridge High School. And I'm just going to read the final paragraph real quickly. This was the meeting where teachers joined us, and it was an open forum for them to share their thoughts. And I read, There was overall concern about the toll that chasing the carrot of weighted grades takes on students' mental and physical well-being. Desire was expressed to know more about Ridge students after they leave Ridge. There is some feeling that there are a good number of Ridge graduates who are not finding a good fit with their initial college selection. Mr. Syed stated that the counseling department used to send out a postgraduate survey and that the response rate was extremely low, and that would be under 10%. This is a common issue with postgraduate surveys. One suggestion was to try a social media platform to track alumni. So we don't have any data, and no report or no minutes suggested that we have data. It was more an expression of a desire for information of that nature.
Thank you. And actually, that was something I was going to comment on survey response rates, because it made me think of, I'm working on a project at Rutgers, and we're having low response rate on survey of alumni of a different type of school, not K to 12. And so we were actually discussing, the professor was talking about using some of the grant money to incentivize the survey response. Like if you do the survey, you get a sweatshirt or something. So it's a common problem to track down people, especially after they've left an institution, to get them to fill out a survey. But with social media, there may be an opportunity to try again and get some results from the Ridge grads. That's a good idea.
I also want to say that when we were talking about that, we weren't necessarily talking about kids not being able to do the work at school. We were really talking about them not being able to handle being away, more of a social, emotional issue than an academic issue, because of all the people I speak to that have kids who've gone to college, they think they are very well prepared for the academics. Like, I mean, for example, I think anecdotally, someone just told me this weekend, their son went away, and he's like, oh my gosh, we're doing stuff that I already did at Ridge, like last year. So I don't think that we were talking about kids going to school not being like, oh, I can't do the work. I think we were talking about they're going to school and they're like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. I don't have that support system I had at home, and we're not really preparing kids very well that way. I'm not talking about just the school, I'm talking about in general. And so that's how I feel like we were talking about. We weren't necessarily talking about kids not getting educated
We were
properly.
talking about the big picture.
Yes.
The whole child.
Like the whole child, and how, the pressure to get into a certain school that you think is the right school, then you get there and it's not, because you don't like it and you're not the smartest one there. But you struggled, but you work so hard in high school to get to this place that you can't handle. So that's more of what we were talking about, I think.
Okay. I think at this point we're up to board forum. We have a couple of topics listed here too. The first one is increasing time in health and physical education. These two topics were on the agenda last time, but it got so late at night that we had put them off for today. So the first topic has come up in a number of committees over the past while. So this is something that's come out of the Social Emotional Learning Committee, as well as discussed in curriculum. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and start the conversation. Want to?
I'll just start by saying this has come up several times when we've had the teachers come to the social emotional learning committee and speak openly about their thoughts about where we could add programming, which was something we talked about a lot last year. And the prevailing or continuing opinion is that there'd be an opportunity in health if there were more time in health. And I'll just point out for the community, in case people don't know, sophomores get one marking period of health that has no health in it because they take driver's ed. So they really don't have any opportunity to work on these kind of topics with sophomores at all.
All right, I'll jump in there. People can write hate mail to me. I mean, we really talked about how in order to it's the only place available to get kids to where they don't have like the academic pressures, the stress, of like getting like the best grade or getting like the highest. But you can, it's gym class, which lots of kids don't take because they have option 2. Like, we're just gonna throw it out there. Option 2 is the issue. It's not, whether we have enough, and you'd have to work out something different because everyone would have to take gym, and then they'd have to all be able to take their get into it would have to be health would be worked around that, because then we'd have all the kids would be involved in the classes and going to if we can add extra health classes in there for the sophomores, for the freshmen, for the juniors and seniors, and then but I don't know if it's a curricular issue or.
No, you're right. It would be an addition of some time in health, maybe not another marking period, but some undetermined period of weeks that would, of course, have an impact on option 2.
So, and that was like the issue.
Well, that was one of the issues with it, but I think that Mr. Shello and a lot of the health teachers have brought it up numerous times to us, that if they just had an extension of a few weeks, like Mrs. Gray just said, and we talked about different scenarios on how that could work, even just extending the health curriculum a few weeks and not being tied to the marking periods the way we have the other academic classes. So it's just a matter of, like you said, of finding time to where it could fit in and how you reach everybody so that it doesn't necessarily have to be an option 2 issue. It's just, but everybody is supposed to have health, no matter what. No one can opt out of health. So it just seemed, like an interesting idea or way to be creative with it and how to get more of these, more of the programming. The teachers are asking for more programming with the students. As parents are asking for more programming with the students and education on a number of different topics. So it makes sense to me what that is going to look like. I don't know, but I'm supportive of adding more time to the health curriculum, health curriculums, if it helps them.
I have a couple of questions. Is this related just to Ridge, or are we also looking at this in terms of William Annan? Because they have, it's a cycle typically over at William Annan. So that for those 6 weeks, they don't have PE. So I'm questioning that. My other question, I fully support lengthening the number of weeks in health. I think there are a lot more topics that they could review. That being said, I also recognize that if you don't have it tied to marking periods, it opens a whole can of worms, because there's some kids whose schedules switch. So they might have PE, I'm just making this up for now, but they might have PE in a marking period, first and second mark period, second period, and then you get to third marking period and their schedule switches, and now they have an elective during that time slot, and then they have PE now, 5th period, something like that. So that's another thing that would have to be looked at. And then my other thing is, one of the things I've always liked at Ridge in terms of the PE and the option 2 is, realistically, the kids who use option 2 for the sports are the students who are very involved in sports. And sometimes when they are in the PE classes, their level of intensity is different than the other students who are not the athletes. And I have found for both of my children, their experience in PE is very positive because they don't have to worry that they're not the fastest, they're not the best athlete, they aren't going to catch the ball all the time. They feel like they can actually participate without the stress of knowing that, if they strike out, or they don't get on base, or they don't make a basket, somebody's not going to be on their back about it because their love of a specific sport is so great. And I would hate to lose that for those students who fall into that bowl, because I do think that ties into their mental health and their feelings about physical education.
Just to complicate the scheduling conundrum even further, I'm not sure if anyone's thought about the fact that all the freshmen are required to participate in Project Adventure. Just one marking period. First one, I believe. But then there are juniors and seniors who are the peer leaders helping with the Project Adventure. So that creates additional scheduling problems. Now, that being said, I agree. I think it would be wonderful if we could incorporate more of these concepts into the curriculum. So I think we're going to have to get really creative. Maybe we need to think of things like an online course that the kids could work in, that could be content that's, 2 or 3 hours worth of additional information that could be supplemented by a single in-classroom session. Or maybe instead of extending for a week, maybe it's 1 day a week during a marking period when a student's participating in option 2, so the student athletes can get the additional curriculum but still get the break during their athletic season. I mean, it's going to require some thought to make it work. That's going to be the big challenge.
And I think I also support adding time in health, but I think we should probably look at health and PE separately. Rather than like just lumping them together, I think we should consider additional time in each one separately, because I think the issues really are different.
Yeah, Mike?
I think the discussion is good, but things like today's society, we just got done seeing forensics and Latin and math and science, and my gosh, high pressure situations that the kids are in. The world is changing, and I don't think we or the people who are advising us understand very well what those changes are. And I'll give you an example. The kids are not getting married, and they're not having children, and I don't care what you tell me about that. That's a major shift in civilization, and we haven't even come to grips with some of these basic things that are happening to us, and yet we're using old-fashioned ideas to try, we'll put this into health class. You don't even begin to understand what's going on. Society is changing radically, and so that's my 2 cents.
I had a comment about health class that might relate to what you just said. One of the things I like that the health teachers have been doing even more than they used to recently, is to send notes home to the parents when they're talking about different topics in health class, which is very helpful, especially if you have kids that don't come home and tell you what they learned at school that day. It's been very helpful at WAMS this year for me to be able to bring up conversations with my 6th grader, it's about things that he may have been talking about. So I think, obviously there's only so much that can be done in health class to solve all of the things going on in our society that kids are dealing with, but we can certainly try to communicate, what's going on in the classroom with families so they can also work on it on their end. I am definitely supportive of looking at creative options on how to, get more time to deal with health and things like mindfulness and things like that. So I guess we should probably ask for more specific ideas to be brought to committee. You know what I mean? That and I guess scheduling issues
Mr.
addressed.
is working on that.
Right, and
already.
the scheduling issues and the staffing issues and
Right.
stuff,
Yeah.
how it would all fit together, because it's complicated, as people mentioned. Okay. Mrs. Korn?
I mean, I just want, the teachers are very adamant, I have to say, about getting all the kids in gym. Because they feel like that is where they have a break in the school day. They said that's where they could do stuff like the yoga, like this and that. It doesn't have to be competitive sports. It can be anything. It's where everyone gets out. Everyone gets a break. We're always talking about, can they eat lunch outside? Well, no, but they can go outside from gym. You know, that's just how I looked at it. And they were adamant about it. The gym teachers were like, we need all the kids to be involved, or else what is it good to do anybody? You know, and I get it. Like, but gym doesn't have to be a dog-eat-dog kind of situation. I mean, you're going to be dealing with competitive, non-competitives all the time. And option 2 seems to be a scheduling nightmare all by itself. And they're also saying kids are just there's hundreds of kids in study hall. What are they doing? What do you think they're doing? I want to give everyone a chance to raise their hand. They're on their phones. So, and I'm not saying everybody. I'm not going to go a blanket statement on everybody. But, you know, we're talking about SEL. We're talking about, you know, I mean, if you want to make real change, then make real change. You know, I don't know. I mean, we're talking about helping kids, like, you know, deal with, like, the pressures of school. So, you know, are the kids going to make these decisions? Like, yeah, I'd like to go sit on my phone for an hour or two. That'd be great. That's not helping anyone's mental health. And, you know, if we want to be proactive, we have to really make some tough decisions about being proactive. And a lot of people aren't going to like it. But, you know, we have to talk about it and see, you know, what do we think? What do people think? And since we have like 4 people here, it's kind of tough to know. So, you know, I mean, that's what I think. I think it's better. I think all kids being involved in gym class is better than giving half the kids an out. And then you have to go to the Y, and you have to do, it's a pain in the neck. It's a pain in the neck for me. I wouldn't let my kids do it. My daughter took gym as a senior, so I was like, no, you're going to gym. I mean, I don't know.
I guess we have to address option 2 in several different ways, though, because there are the students who choose to go to the Y in lieu of PE class,
Right.
but there's also student athletes every single season who have extraordinary amounts of hours of commitment participating in their sport. The student athletes that I know, they're not on their phone in that study hall. They're getting their homework done because they know they're not going to be home till 11 that night because they have an away meet.
Right.
That's a different situation, and
but my student athletes
that
don't
would
do
cause more stress by
Well,
requiring
I get
them
it,
to not
but, you
have
know.
it.
Has there ever been any, and I don't know, has there been any thought to changing up PE a little bit to, like within a marking period, you might have, let's say, I'm making this up, four teachers. One is offering yoga. One is offering, a basketball clinic. One is offering working out in the universal equipment. Versus it's just one gym class and everybody's there, because then you might be able to address all the different things of, we need to get everybody in there, but we need the people who, they need a de-stressor, so maybe they're choosing the mindfulness yoga. You want the kids who love that competitive, they're doing the basketball clinic or the soccer clinic. I mean, you have to, I'm just thinking, try to be creative in terms of that, like kind of how you choose your electives. You choose what you're going to take for PE this marking period.
We've talked about that a little bit at curriculum, and actually we've talked about things like there are some school districts that have, what's it called? APE? So it's like super gym, right? For the kids that really want to sweat and go crazy and, really want to compete. But if you remember back to how we got to where we are, there were budgetary considerations that reduced the number of PE teachers, so the choices got limited when that happened. So there can be more choices, at a cost. There needs to be more staffing. So it kind of goes hand in hand. To your point, it's nice to be able to we talked about this at the SEL committee with the PE teachers, to give kids choices and hope that a little less like electives, you actually get the choice you're hoping for, and then it's a pleasant experience and it isn't bogged down with what you're describing, but that has monetary implications.
We've talked about how if we did start making changes with the numbers that we have in option 2 and the staffing considerations, there might have to be something phased in, you know what I mean, to make it work, because if you just did some really drastic change, you wouldn't even know how many kids would schedule for what. It would be a little bit crazy. So, Mike?
I don't agree at all with this stress business, and I think the SEL committee, I don't hear any discussion except stress, stress, stress. I'd love to hear some comments and discussion of what's really going on there, but I totally disagree with the whole emphasis that I hear out of the committee, because all you talk about is stress. I think the forensics and all that is sports. I want to take the extra courses. I don't want to take gym if I'm playing a sport. I want to take another course. I want to learn more. And I'm sorry, I'm not at the same school as you guys. And you want to blame everything on stress. I might begin to blame it on the telephone and the fact they have no friends anymore, because friendship is, going out and playing together. Well, they don't do that anymore. They sit at the table and they're on the computer. So this is a very complicated subject, and I think you guys are going in the wrong direction.
Does anyone else have comments? So should we ask to get some ideas at committee? Okay. So next we have weighting of courses at Ridge High School.
I'm happy to start this because I've had this conversation before. I think that there's a little bit of the gerbil on the wheel that rolls round and round and round and round for these kids. And I may be a minority when I'm thinking this, but part of the weighting for kids is they're calculating in their heads, how do I get the highest GPA so that I can make myself, the best candidate for X college. And it may not necessarily be that they're selecting courses that they really belong, that they can handle. And I think that if we were to take that element out, then you take away the incentive to be enrolling in courses you may not be able to handle, and then you're just taking the courses that you can handle, you're very interested in. To me, it's a little bit like the race to nowhere, all these APs and all these honors courses, and I do see the stress as a problem. I've heard these kids come forward week after week when we have these Board of Ed meetings, and they talk about the stress that they feel, and they ask for help, and I feel like if we can do something to make them realize that they don't have to put themselves in the position of creating stress for themselves. That is not what high school is supposed to be about.
Well, it certainly was what my high school was about, my college.
But we didn't have the same problems back then that we have now.
I'm sorry. The problems are different, that's right. And we're accusing them of being directed by stress, and I don't agree at all. The problems are much more complicated. We haven't identified them yet. I don't know what weighting of courses means. I don't have a clue what you're saying.
It means that when you take an honors or an AP course, you get a weight added to your grade. So like a B plus in an honors course is the same weight as an A in a CP course. That's what it means.
Why would you give a lower level course the same?
Well, what you should know is colleges will when you apply to college and you give them your GPA, they re-weight them.
I understand that.
So it just would be, instead of them having to re-weight them, they're getting what they're going to be calculating.
But we're not sending very many kids to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton either.
All the more reason that we don't necessarily need to worry about the 5.0 or the 3 point or the 4.67.
It's a much more complicated topic than just a little superficial discussion.
What do you want? We're talking about it. I mean,
Well,
what more do you
that's
want?
good. I started out agreeing with you. That discussion is
I mean,
good.
what more do you want? We're here talking about it right now.
Well, that's why I'm talking.
Boom.
I'm
Then
trying to
stop
contribute.
complaining.
You know what, Mike? You're not contributing, though. You're just insulting everyone else.
No.
You're not offering any
I'm not
solution.
insulting you unless I start talking about the presentations.
Okay, that's
Okay,
fine.
the committee presentations, and I've left that off the table right now. Okay, because I have a problem with the board. There's no
All right,
question.
let's get back to weighting the classes, because that's what I want to talk about.
So this topic has come up over the years. Back, I remember maybe 8 years ago, it was a hot topic on the board for a while. There's not a lot of research out there on it, and there's also not a lot of examples of schools that have switched from one version to the other. There's lots of schools out there that don't wait. There's schools that wait. There's all different ways of weighting. Like some schools give more weight to AP than honors. Some give AP and honors the same weight. Some give just a little bit of a bump. Some give more of a bump. Some of the other things that have come up, some people don't do letter grades, they do out of 100. There's different GPA scales out there that, so the colleges have like millions of different types of GPAs that they look at when they're looking at students. So it's not that easy to figure out what the colleges are actually looking at and how they unweight and things like that. Bev?
Yeah, I agree with this conceptually. We need to do something to drive our students back to finding their joy. I want a student taking an AP government class because they're fascinated by government, not because they can get more points for doing it. But I think we need to move very cautiously forward in this initiative. I think we've really got to engage our guidance department because we want to make sure that we're not hurting our students' prospects for getting into college based on the way we change it. If we transition, we need to transition in a way that's very clear when they're applying to colleges that we've done it the right way. And it's going to be a big challenge because, like you said, everyone does it differently, and some do and some don't. So this isn't something we're going to flash cut and say next year everything's unweighted. I think we really have to investigate it and do it in a way because no one wants their kids junior going into senior year class to be the guinea pigs for this transition. Yeah, it would have to be phased in from the bottom, and it would have to be done slowly and carefully and with a lot of research.
I mean, if there were other schools that had done it and we could see the difference, like did the students make different choices? How many, how much did it affect their choices? It's hard because, colleges are telling the kids, we want to see the most rigorous transcripts. Well, even if they don't wait, they're still going to be thinking, I should take harder classes. So we don't know how much it would affect the students' decision making. Some schools limit the number of AP or honors classes students can take. Some have just a hard limit. Some of them have limits based on your GPA, so you can only take more if you're doing really well in the ones you're taking. So there's other options besides unweighting out there, but it's not that simple because there's a lot of options of how to do it.
I was just going to say, I definitely think we need more information and definitely more data to support it. I also think that we need to hear from more teachers as well, because let's face it, they're going to be the ones on the front lines, hearing from the students and the parents if it goes well or if it doesn't. If we were to make this change and how they feel about the students and their choices, I think is important.
Well, and we've also know that there's been over the years seems like more and more students trying to appeal into courses. So that's another issue. Like if maybe they shouldn't be appealing into the courses.
Right. That's a whole other issue.
And when you have I have an 8th grader, and when they're going for, they're like, well, everyone's taking honors bio because it's the easiest honors to take. I mean, it's not because they love bio. It's because the rumor is it's easier. I mean, what are our numbers in honors bio? It's silly. Look at the numbers in honors chemistry. I was looking at them like 45% of the class taking honors chemistry, and then when people saying that just because, it's honors chemistry. It's called honors chemistry. It's not supposed to be easy. It says honors in front of it. Okay, even if they don't give you if they don't give you a summer assignment, and if they don't, it doesn't mean it's not rigorous because it's honors chemistry. It's in the name of the course. So when we have people just taking it because, I don't understand it. 45% of the kids can't be interested in honors chemistry. It's not possible. It seems impossible to me. I don't get it. It's like almost 50% of kids are taking honors chemistry and sophomores. That's crazy.
It's a good program.
I'm not saying the program's not good.
No, and I also think you're not saying let's get rid of the rigor because a lot of kids really can handle the rigor, but we're just saying what do we do to address the fact that there are kids that can't handle that are putting themselves in that position, and is there a way that we can help?
Unweighting sounds like a good answer only because then you're like, oh, well then, if I take that and I have my tutor and I have a tutor, then I can probably pass that class and I'll get a B or C, whatever, A, B, and then I'll be weighted this, and then even if I took the other class, which I could probably handle on my own and then get like an A, it doesn't matter because a B is weighted higher. I'm just saying how kids think. Like, you know, they're playing like a weighting game, and the teacher said it, and I hear from other parents, and you know, when your 8th grader is saying, "Oh, Mom, I want to take that because everyone says it's the easiest honors course," I'm like, "Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, how well did you do in science in 8th grade? I mean, I don't know. Like, you know, why put yourself in that position as a freshman? Because you can show rigor by just going up from taking CPs to taking 1 honors or taking 1 AP. That's rigor. I don't know. You can't have it both ways. So I just think it's something to talk about, something to discuss, something to think. If we think it could work, it would be something that we can put out there.
Tim?
Do we have a process? We've talked about this before and mentioned it, like guidance counselor or teacher recommendations for next class in a sequence. Do we have that?
It's not part of the qualifying process. Like, there are some schools that you have to have a teacher recommendation or you're not allowed in the class. We don't have that. Teachers are always willing to give their opinion if a parent or a student like goes and talks to them or something, I think, but it's not part of the official qualifying like requirements for a class.
So is that something that we could potentially look at doing, or is that like a no-no?
We do it a little bit on the transition from William Annan into Ridge, where every parent has a meeting with their child's Ridge guidance counselor to do the scheduling, and the guidance counselors do come with recommendations, but the recommendations are separate from the actual qualifying factors to be eligible to take the class.
Yeah. Might be something that's useful because at least it's like, you know, for certain students, if they're choosing a class or something, it's almost like a scholarship you had in college, right? Like you have to maintain this certain grade point average, and if you can't hack it for the first marking period or the second marking period, you can kind of revolve out of that track or something like that. I mean, I think we did that in my high school where the guidance counselors kind of came on and they were like, listen, if you can't AP work, there's a big jump here from like, you know, your regular course to your AP course, you know, you might want to double check that, or might, like Ms. Korn was saying, kind of drop one of the honors classes if you really are interested in this subject. And I guess the funny thing about kids being interested in a certain subject in high school, I always kind of think back to college where I think 90% of the people in my freshman hallway were all bio majors, and I think one of us ended up as a bio major, so the interests change very radically quickly.
Yeah, my comment on the honors chemistry is it has nothing to do with the kids that get into the program. It has everything to do with the way it's being taught and the curriculum. And I think we're looking at the wrong place, because you can't have students that are getting A's and B's in the first 2 semesters and they're getting D's in the second 2 semesters. I'm going to argue it's the teaching and the curriculum, and it wasn't picked up, and it has to be fixed. And I'm going to blame it on the staff and not the selection of the kids in the course. And that's radically different than the way you guys see it.
I think we're talking more
Generally
overall,
right now.
We're not focusing on chemistry. It's overall we're talking.
I understand, but I'm quoting letters from parents who are saying that their kids all of a sudden ended up getting D's in the second half of the course, and not only this year, but the year before. I'm going to argue that the program's been set up poorly and not conducted well. It needs a fix. And it has nothing to do with they put too many kids in the program. That's my opinion.
Getting back to the topic, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I agree that we definitely need to hear from teachers and guidance counselors, and also we need to do our research on this before we kind of, before we make changes, to make sure we're doing it in a sensible fashion. And I also agree that it should be phased in.
It's a small sample, but we did have 2 different sets of teachers at the ad hoc committee, and I mean, they don't all teach weighted courses, but they were all unanimously supportive of the idea of some kind of change in the weighting. Obviously, we would need to talk to more.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear from teachers at schools that don't have weighting also, to see how they feel. I mean, anecdotally, someone said, oh, if it's not weighted, then there'll be even more pressure on the kids in the honors or AP courses to get an A, because like right now, if they get a B, they're like, oh, it's okay because it's weighted. So I don't even know if that's true. This is just like conjecture.
Well, if the college is unweighted anyway, then it is conjecture.
I'm not so much, I mean, I am concerned about the colleges and the kids having transcripts that get them into college, but I'm more concerned with like what would actually affect a kid's decision-making process for what class to take. Because if it doesn't affect their choices, then it's not really going to solve the problem that we're trying to do.
What's going to make them overextend themselves?
Do we know if there are any comparable school districts in New Jersey that don't have weighting? Because if I remember correctly, all of the districts that we generally compare ourselves to all have weighting.
They all have weighting.
So that's hard too, because then you're not really leading edge, you're bleeding edge if you're the first one who jumps in and tries it.
But some of them have limited, right? They limit the amount of APs.
Yes,
or
there's
the
definitely
amount of
comparable
classes
schools that have a
count
limit
for
to what
weighting.
you can take.
Right.
Yeah. We haven't found one in New Jersey that has unweighted that's comparable. No. In other parts of the country, I think it's more common.
And wasn't there, Mr. Markarian, maybe you can speak to this, you shared something with us about a school that might be, either is or might be moving to a 0 to 100 scale where there's a number of points bump rather than a grade value bump?
Yeah, we've been looking already in terms of gathering data, and I think I haven't found anything, as Ms. McCune pointed out, with regard to, do it this way because it's better, or do it that way because it's better, and here's the research that says why it's better, but at least doing legwork to find out what other districts are doing and how they do their weighting and their calculations. And it would appear, I'm trying to get a little more information, that some districts do weighting without using traditional 0 to 4 scales or 0 to 5 scales like college GPA, but they just stick with 0 to 100, and they build in their weighting by adding points to students' averages on that 0 to 100 scale. The one thing I was trying to find out was, do they have scenarios where some kids are at, if they weight 5 points, say, for honors, do you get to 105 if you have 100 average? So I haven't found out the answer to that question, but I did find one school that does look like they're sticking with a 100-point scale, and they're not converting to a GPA scale. So they're reporting all their averages, 98, 75, 82, for year-end courses. There's no calculation that, switches it to 4.3 or something like that.
On the 100-point scale, I had a good friend in college, got a 17, and when you weight that with a 90 and an 80, and his class average was permanently destroyed by that 0 to 100 weighting. Just terrible. And he wasn't that poorly a student. He didn't do that well on a couple tests, but it just destroyed his whole college record.
Yeah, Jen.
To me, I think it's great that these two topics are being discussed together, because I think one of the things that we really have heard from the public and we've heard from the kids is the concern for our kids' mental well-being. And I think the physical activity and the stress of the rigorousness of some of these courses are all tied in together. So I think it's a good starting point that we've addressed both of them back to back, because I do think that they do go a little bit hand in hand.
I did find one school in New Jersey that doesn't weight elective. It doesn't put the electives in your GPA. So that would encourage students, I think, to take whatever they wanted as their electives. So I mean, there are a few other like hybrid things out there, but because the things that make me most upset is kids dropping something they enjoy, like music or art, to take another AP class just because of their GPA. Don't even like that. So.
The problem with this challenging topic is you could argue that students take electives to pull up their GPA because it's the things they really connect with and enjoy. So, yeah.
So then you'd be penalizing those students.
No. Nobody said this was going to be easy.
No, it's not.
I agree with Mrs. Korn. I think that we could get as we often do, strapped in analysis paralysis, because this could go on interminably. And I'm not saying make a change tomorrow or even next September or even the following September, but at a certain point, there has to be a process that we say, just like with the rotating drop schedule, is it the best thing for us? Is it not the best thing for us? And maybe that research will help guide us there. But we will always, to your point, Mrs. Swarner, be able to find some caveat that someone's going to have an issue with. There are people that have caveats and issues with what we have right now.
Yes.
Does anyone else have anything for board forum?
I do.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I was on Friday afternoon at the WAMS girls lacrosse team won the middle school championship, and they beat Bridgewater, which is a huge accomplishment for them. And it was a very tight game. It was 10-9 we won. So it was lots of back and forth. It was at Mountain Park. It was about 1,000 degrees. But they did great, and they were so happy, and they worked really hard, and it's a really nice team. And I thought that, that it was fun. And there's tons of, I don't know how the kids, usually there's not that many people at the games. There were so many people came out, and other kids, and some college, some brothers and sisters. So it was really nice, and they did a great, it was a really nice game. I'm very proud of them. They did a great job. And it was fun.
I just want to say congratulations again to all the students and the parents and the administrators that got all the awards tonight and participate in all these clubs. It was amazing to see kind of all the participation, and definitely makes me regret some choices from my misspent youth, I guess. But the second thing I wanted to say is that I was with Ms. Woolridge today at Ridge High School. We observed Mr. Kakaval's robotics class.
Yeah.
I only signed up to observe robotics 2, but I had so much fun that I stayed for robotics 1 right after that.
Right.
And
I was going to mention that.
it was amazing to see. It was literally what you always wanted to see from a school. It was an enthusiastic teacher. It was grades 9 through 12, all in one class of all different abilities. You had athletes, you had boys, girls. Everybody was working together in a collaborative environment. Every student was engaging and could tell about the problem that they were trying to solve. It was great to see. So if this somehow osmoses back to Ridge High School or any of the other schools, and any teachers are willing to invite any board members to any of their classes, I am always looking for a way to get out of work, so please send invitations this way. So I don't know if Mr. Kakbal or Ms. Markarian or somebody set that up, but it was great, and I would do that every day if I could. Yeah, and Mr. Kakbal has the most interesting business card. It's a piece of plywood with a laser etched name and phone number on it. So it was great. So I just want to say, congratulations to him and the kids in the class. It was a really great experience.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up also, and I totally agree with everything you said. And I also wanted to thank Mr. Fackelman for being the administrator that he's right there. Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time today. It was a great experience. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, in addition to everything else, there definitely were students that were coming in like during their study hall, and they were coming in to work on their projects in this class because they enjoyed it so much. So I thought that was interesting too.
Can I just ask a question? I just think the board forum is such a great time for us to be discussing things, and it's so unfortunate that by the time we get to it,
Everybody's gone.
is there any way to restructure every once in a while? I mean, I don't know if there's certain protocol you have to follow to have the board forum discussion either before the reports or just so that we have more, because that's what we want them to hear.
Yeah.
In case they have, then during non-agenda items, they could come back if they had questions or comments based on what they're hearing.
Think of all the suspense we're building.
Yeah. We've had this discussion in the past. I guess the concerns, there's a couple concerns. One is we have to conduct our regular business, so we would have to put some kind of limit on it, obviously, because, we could just talk all night and then never get our meeting done. We have had specific forums on specific topics, like where we knew a lot of people were coming out, and let the board have a discussion on one topic, like school security or whatever, after when we knew everyone would still be here. So we've done it on very specific topics. We haven't just had like an open-ended board forum earlier in the meeting. Certainly, I mean, I would be open to, if we have a particular topic, not just some random thing that a board member decides to bring up, that we're going to list on the agenda so the public would know that it was on there. I mean, I would be open to that idea when we have a specific topic to list. You know what I mean? Of doing something earlier, I think. I don't know. How do the rest of you feel?
No, I think it's great, but when we run exceptionally late, board forum is always the first thing we cut. So we just kind of have to do some better agenda planning, because if we do board forum first, then we have to conduct our business on a busy agenda night. We could run the risk of being here till well after midnight. So we just have to plan appropriately.
Or some meetings we know are shorter agendas. Maybe those are the ones that we can pick when we're gonna.
Right. Or just put a limit on the board forum and say if we're still talking after whatever amount of time, then we're putting it on hold and finish it at the end or whatever. We don't have to just keep going. So, okay. Do people feel okay with trying that sometime when we have a particular topic and see how it goes?
Summer meetings would be perfect.
Yeah.
They tend to be short.
Definitely.
Yeah, we'll get tons of people there.
Yeah, really. Yeah, let's try it when no one's there. No, we definitely should see. I think in our next meeting, I don't know what else on the agenda, but the end of the year board meetings can often be pretty crowded agenda, so it might not be the best time to experiment. We'll have to see. I had just one thing to mention. I don't know if anyone has gone to any of the DOE forums about park, but I am signed up to go to one of them. I know members of the community have been going, and I don't know if anyone has reported back, but did you hear back? They didn't send you a thing to sign up for dates? Well, there was like a link that you could go on and they listed all the dates. You didn't get the link?
No.
I'll forward you the link and then you can sign up. But I do know people from the community that are going. I think there's one tonight that several people were going to. So I guess we'll hear back. I'm hoping that the structure of them is open-ended enough that people feel like they get to give their feedback and that people don't come home all annoyed.
There was a big article in Sunday Star Ledger, if you didn't see it. It was about how the state did not have clarity around park as a graduation requirement for the class of 2020. It's blowing up. I think it's the third or fourth article on the topic I've seen in the past week.
We could have told them that a long time ago.
Well, we did. They just hadn't written about it.
It's a shocker, too.
And there was also an op-ed on New Jersey Spotlight about the same topic. So.
Does anyone have any other topics?
I just have a quick thing. I think a year ago, maybe, each committee used to do goals. And I don't know, I just wanted to throw it out there to committees to think about if they want to do that for next year, because it sort of fell off everybody's agenda this year. But I don't know, I thought it was a good thing, but maybe each committee could talk about it going forward. It's in the summer, decide.
I'm definitely supportive of that suggestion.
And if I can add on to that, we all did goal setting about a year ago, so maybe we should go back and revisit those goals and see how we did in those committees.
I mean, one thing, when we did, the first time we did committee goals was when we still did our committee realignment in the spring. So then it changed to, you know what I mean, when the election changed. I think, goals kind of go better from school, like a school year time frame instead of starting new goals in January. So maybe the current committees want to do goals for next school year, and then when we realign, the goals will already be set. Because it's kind of hard to set them in the middle of the school year, because then you start running out of time to talk about them. So maybe current committees can come up with goals for next school year. Anything else? No? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion for adjournment? Mrs. Waldrose and Mrs. Swarner?
Don't we have to say aye or something?